The world is once again watching Afghanistan. A tense standoff has erupted between the United States and the Taliban in Kabul. At its heart, President Donald Trump's demand to reclaim Bagram Airbase. The Taliban's response? An immediate, public, and absolute no. This isn't just about a military base, it's a test of the Taliban's grip on power and a flashpoint in Afghanistan's long struggle with foreign intervention. Trump's threats of consequences have sent ripples of unease across Central Asia. For the Taliban, this is a chance to prove themselves as guardians of Afghan independence. The world waits, uncertain if this war of words will escalate into something far more dangerous. The choices made now will shape Afghanistan's destiny and the balance of power in a volatile world. Bagram Airbase is more than just a military installation. It is a monument to Afghanistan's long, turbulent history of conflict, foreign intervention, and shifting power. For decades, its runways and walls have witnessed the ambitions of empires and the struggles of a nation caught in the crossfire. Originally constructed by the Soviets in the 1950s, Bagram was intended to project Soviet influence deep into Central Asia. During the brutal Soviet occupation of the 1980s, it became their main hub, a heavily fortified stronghold from which they launched military operations, supplied troops, and tried to control the Afghan countryside. The base was a symbol of Soviet might, but also of the fierce resistance they faced from Afghan fighters. When the Soviets finally withdrew, Bagram did not find peace. Instead, it became a battleground for rival Afghan warlords, each vying for control of this strategic prize. Throughout the 1990s, the base changed hands multiple times, its runways scarred by shelling, and its buildings battered by years of civil war. Everything changed in 2001 when the United States invaded Afghanistan. The Americans transformed Bagram into their largest and most important base in the country. It became a sprawling city within a city, complete with hangars, barracks, airstrips, and even American fast food restaurants, an outpost of Western life in the heart of Afghanistan. For 2 decades, Bagram was the nerve center of U.S. military operations, intelligence gathering, and logistics. Yet, for many Afghans, Bagram was also a place of fear and resentment. Its infamous detention facility became a symbol of occupation, secrecy, and lost sovereignty. Stories of indefinite detention and alleged abuses fueled anger and protest, making Bagram a focal point for anti-American sentiment. In July 2021, after nearly 20 years, the U.S. military left Bagram overnight, shutting off the lights and departing in secrecy. The sudden exit created a power vacuum, leaving the base and the country on the brink of a new chapter, uncertain and vulnerable. Just weeks later, the Taliban walked into Bagram unopposed, raising their flag over the once mighty fortress. For them, it was the ultimate victory, a powerful symbol of the end of foreign occupation and the return of Afghan control. Today, Bagram stands in silence, its vast expanse marked by damaged buildings and empty runways. It is both a trophy for the victors and a haunting reminder of Afghanistan's turbulent past, a place where the ambitions of empires have collided and crumbled. The legacy of Bagram continues to shape the emotions and politics of Afghanistan, fueling the passions and grievances that drive the current standoff. Its story is far from over, echoing in the hearts of those who lived through its many chapters. The crisis erupted in September 2025, sparked by President Trump's blunt public demand to retake Bagram. "We want it back, right away," he declared, leaving no room for negotiation. This demand shattered months of quiet diplomacy between Washington and Kabul. Just recently, the Taliban had released an American hostage, hinting at possible normalization. Trump's ultimatum replaced cautious engagement with public confrontation. The timing was pointed, just after the Taliban's military parade celebrating their Bagram victory. Trump's move directly challenged the Taliban's narrative of independence. Domestically, it played well for Trump, allowing him to project strength and promise to reverse what he calls a national humiliation. For the Taliban, conceding Bagram would be seen as weakness. The stage was set for a high-stakes showdown. The Taliban's response was swift, resolute, and left little room for ambiguity. Within hours of the proposal, their leadership convened in Kabul, determined to present a united front to both their own people and the international community. The message was unmistakable. Afghanistan's sovereignty was not up for negotiation. Spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid, the public face of the Taliban, invoked the 2020 Doha Agreement, reminding the United States and its allies of their explicit pledge not to threaten Afghan sovereignty or interfere in the country's internal affairs. He emphasized that any foreign military presence would be a direct violation of those commitments, and warned that such actions would have serious consequences for future relations. Defense Chief Fasihuddin Fitrat was even more blunt, declaring, "Ceding even an inch of our soil is impossible." His words echoed through the halls of power in Kabul, signaling that the Taliban's military leadership was fully aligned with the political leadership. For them, territorial integrity is not just a matter of pride, but a non-negotiable principle. Afghan diplomats quickly echoed this sentiment, framing the rejection as part of Afghanistan's long and storied history of resistance to foreign invaders. They referenced past struggles, from the British Empire to the Soviet Union, reminding the world that Afghans have always fiercely defended their homeland, regardless of the odds. Yet, despite their uncompromising stance on military matters, Taliban officials were careful to leave the door open for economic and political engagement with the world. They signaled a willingness to cooperate on trade, humanitarian aid, and regional stability, hoping to avoid total isolation while still drawing a firm line on security issues. For the Taliban, giving up Bagram Airbase would be nothing short of political suicide. It would not only undermine their legitimacy in the eyes of their supporters, but also be seen as a betrayal of the core promise that brought them to power: defending Afghanistan's independence and territorial integrity at all costs. Their stance is existential. Defending Afghan independence is not just a policy, but a matter of survival for the movement. The Taliban's fighters, many of whom spent years in conflict, see themselves as guardians of a hard-won sovereignty. The message to both Afghans and the world was clear: no foreign bases, no compromise, and no exceptions. The Taliban are determined to ensure that Afghanistan remains free from external military influence, no matter the pressure. The Taliban's unity on this issue is both a calculated political move and a matter of survival. By standing together, they hope to deter foreign intervention and solidify their control over the country. The standoff over Bagram has become a defining test of the Taliban's rule, one that will shape Afghanistan's future and its place in the world for years to come. Trump's demand for Bagram Airbase is less about Afghanistan's internal dynamics and more about the broader strategic contest with China. For Trump, Bagram isn't just a military installation left behind in the U.S. withdrawal. It's a potential linchpin in America's efforts to counter Beijing's growing influence in the region. He's repeatedly highlighted the base's proximity to China's Lop Nur nuclear facility, arguing that Bagram would be a perfect outpost for U.S. surveillance and intelligence gathering. From this vantage point, the U.S. could monitor Chinese military activities, missile tests, and even nuclear developments, making Bagram a strategic asset in the new era of great power rivalry. This marks a significant shift in U.S. priorities, from fighting terrorism to preparing for competition with another superpower. The Pentagon and military analysts now see Afghanistan less as a battlefield against insurgents and more as a critical front in the contest for influence between Washington and Beijing. In this new context, Afghanistan is increasingly viewed as a chessboard where the U.S. and China maneuver for advantage. The country's location, wedged between Central and South Asia and bordering China, gives it outsized importance in the geopolitical game. Trump believes the Taliban's dire economic situation gives the U.S. leverage. He's betting that the promise of international aid, diplomatic recognition, or even just economic relief could persuade the Taliban to allow a renewed U.S. presence at Bagram, essentially trading legitimacy or resources for strategic access. But this approach may underestimate the Taliban's deep ideological commitment to sovereignty and their desire to prove independence from foreign powers. For the Taliban, allowing the U.S. back into Bagram could be seen as a betrayal of their core principles. Accepting such a deal would risk making the Taliban look like American pawns, especially in the eyes of their own supporters and the Afghan public. The optics of foreign troops returning, even for strategic reasons, could spark unrest and undermine the Taliban's fragile hold on power. The public nature of Trump's demand, amplified by global media coverage, leaves the Taliban with little room to maneuver or negotiate quietly. Every move is scrutinized, raising the political costs of compromise. The risk of miscalculation is high, with both sides locked into positions they can't easily abandon. Any misstep could escalate tensions, derail fragile negotiations, or even spark a new crisis in the region. The China factor has only raised the stakes. turning Afghanistan into a focal point in the global struggle for power and influence between the world's two largest economies. The standoff comes as Afghanistan faces extreme vulnerability. The Taliban government is crippled by economic collapse, sanctions, frozen assets, and a humanitarian crisis. No country formally recognizes their regime, isolating them from global trade and aid. Internally, the Taliban face threats from ISIS-K and divisions within their own ranks. Any major concession to the U.S. could fracture their movement and embolden enemies. Trump's threats may push the Taliban closer to China, Russia, and Iran, who all oppose a renewed U.S. presence. Afghanistan risks becoming a battleground for global and regional powers once again. The Afghan people remain caught in the crossfire. Experts see Trump's demand as a high-risk gambit with little chance of success. The Taliban's identity is built on resisting foreign occupation. Handing over Bagram would shatter their legitimacy. Analysts warn Trump may be overestimating U.S. leverage and underestimating Taliban resolve. Any U.S. attempt to retake Bagram by force would likely trigger fierce resistance and regional chaos. Such a move could reignite war, destabilize the region, and empower terrorist groups. Some believe Trump's threats are more about U.S. domestic politics than real strategy. But even rhetoric has consequences, hardening positions and poisoning future diplomacy. The Bagram standoff has already made a volatile situation more dangerous. The Bagram standoff is sending shockwaves across the globe. For the U.S., it reopens debates about intervention and its global role. Trump's demand alarms allies and emboldens rivals like China and Russia, who may deepen ties with the Taliban to block U.S. influence. Afghanistan's neighbors, Pakistan, Iran, and the Central Asian republics, fear instability and spillover. The standoff tests the principle of national sovereignty in the 21st century. If the U.S. succeeds, it sets a precedent for powerful nations to override weaker states. If the Taliban hold firm, it's a victory for self-determination and a warning to superpowers. The world is watching to see which way the balance tips. The Bagram confrontation is a lesson in the power of sovereignty and the limits of foreign intervention. For the Taliban, control over their territory is non-negotiable, even at the cost of economic hardship and isolation. The base itself is a symbol of Afghanistan's long history of foreign occupation and resistance. The standoff highlights a shifting world order. The U.S. can no longer impose its will unchallenged. Regional powers like China and Russia now offer smaller states new options. For Afghans, the tragedy is being caught between ideological rulers and outside powers treating their country as a pawn. The world must recognize the limits of its power to shape Afghanistan from the outside. The path forward demands respect for Afghan sovereignty and accountability for its leaders.